All right. I'm going to call this Clinton Public Schools meeting to order. It's Monday, July 13th, 2020. This is our reorganization meeting. That's why I will be calling the meeting to order. At this point, if everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, sorry. Please remain standing for one moment of silence. Join me in a moment of silence for the mother of Peg Devine, occupational therapist in the district. Thank you. All right, at this time, I would entertain any motion for a nomination for the position of school committee chair.
I'd like to nominate Joel Bates for chair.
Second.
We have a nomination first, open and second. Are there any other nominations? I'd entertain a motion to close the nominations.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of closing the nominations?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Now we go back to the original motion, which is to appoint Joel Bates as chair. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll hand the meeting back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Now I will entertain any motions for vice chair.
Nominate Tina Zupanis for vice chair.
Is there a second? Motion having been made and seconded, are there any other nominations? There being none, can we have a motion to close the nominations?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing the nominations?
Aye.
Aye. Back to the original motion on the floor. All those in favor of Tina Zupanis as vice chair of the school committee?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you. All right. Congratulations, by the way, on our three members retaining their seats in a close election. Glad to have you back on the board. Can we have a motion to approve the bills?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, second. Motion having been made and seconded, is there any discussion on the bills? There being none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting on June 15th?
So moved.
Mr. Varakis made the motion.
I'll
Do we have a
second.
Second. Any discussion on the minutes from June 15th? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, thank you very much. Do we have any questions, comments, or requests? There being none. Dr. Meyer.
Okay, so starting with the superintendent report, we do have one retirement. It was a late retirement. Pam Jones, who's an instructional assistant, most recently at Clinton Elementary School, is going to retire at the end of this year, or retired at the end of last school year, I should say. We also have a new appointment, the business manager position. We did post for part-time business manager. We had a screening committee put together. We interviewed a handful of candidates at least, and then we brought back two candidates and offered the position to Glenn Frado. Glenn is here tonight. Glenn is most recently the business manager at Leominster. He's recently retired, which is why he was interested in our part-time position. And he also lives close by in Lancaster, so it's a good commute for him. So he's already been a big help. He's come in a couple of days and really helped us with unemployment. We get a lot of unemployment claims, a lot of unemployment fraud, and he's been helping log right in that system and help us kind of clean a lot of that stuff up. So that's been great. So this is one of those positions, however, where it's officially I recommend the candidate, and the school committee has to formally accept or appoint the candidate. So I'm recommending Glenn to you. I did enclose in your packet, you should have a contract. It has very little, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward contract because he's retired, so it's very few, and part-time, so there's very few benefits or anything. It's just pretty straightforward. So that's the, I guess.
Thank you. So our role here is to advise and consent, which means if the superintendent has put forward a candidate through due diligence, a candidate that is qualified, our role is to consent to approve it. So can we have a motion to offer the contract in front of you to Mr. Fratto?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion having been made and seconded, is there any discussion? There being none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you, congratulations, and welcome to
Welcome.
the Clinton Public Schools.
And I did tell Mr. Fratto he could excuse himself after his portion, and if he wants to join on remotely or something, he can. So.
We will we will not be offended in the least if you don't want to stick around. Thank you. Looking forward to working with you.
All right. Just a couple year-end updates for FY20. We're still finalizing a lot of the things for FY20, so I didn't want to, originally I was hoping to give you a printout, but as we just kind of clean up the end of the year, we're still working on that. I do think we finished FY20 in pretty good shape when we looked at all of our encumbrances and our summer pay that we have to get. I think we are going to be able to hopefully pay off we are completely paid off all of the existing sick leave buyback that had been accumulated. I think we're even going to be able to pay off some of the sick leave buyback that we got from this year with this year's money.
Wow.
So from FY20, with FY20 money, sorry, because we encumbered that because that's a debt that was realized at the end of FY20. So, but we'll wait on that because if we have to that was budgeted for FY21, so if we do have to pay it in FY21, we'll wait on that. But right now, we look pretty good in terms of what we've encumbered. We just got to make sure there's no outstanding bills that we're missing right now. Food service, we got a food service kind of year-end report. You have a couple sheets in there. What was positive was, the food service actually ended the year with about a $30,000 balance in their account. So a lot of that was from some savings, realization of savings and some labor costs, as well as some of the government regulations that made the claiming of the meals easier and some of the grants that they wrote and some of the other things that they got as income. So that was a positive because I was worried when we first started this that it was going to be potentially a shortfall, and we're not allowed to have that revolving account in the negative, so we would have had to make that up. So that was good. The other page from the cafeteria shows the meal counts, and you can see how the meal counts that we've been serving have been going up every month since the pandemic. So in March, we did 4,500 meals, April 11,000, May 15,000, June 16,000. So we've served 48,131 meals, that's breakfast and lunch, since the pandemic started. So since school's been closed. So I think they've been doing a nice job down there. I think that's one of the things we got to look at. That's another one of the hurdles that we'll talk about a little bit later in terms of the reopening plans for school next year is what's going to be permissible and not permissible for cafeteria food. A lot of the talk now is that most things are going to have to be not necessarily pre-packaged, but at least pre-wrapped so that kids are essentially doing almost like a grab and go in the cafeteria, or it's even getting delivered to their classroom. So,
And Steve,
Yes.
quick question for you. So
yeah.
where do we get extra grants, or where's all the money coming from for all the extra lunches that we're providing? Because these are all for free, right? We're not taking any income in.
Right. It's our income from it's our reimbursement claim from the federal government. So we claim those meals. So
Because of COVID, or just?
Because of COVID, we're allowed to claim these ones, right?
Okay.
So they changed those restrictions And now that we're able to go over the summer, it's a separate summer program, you actually get a higher rate of reimbursement for summer meals.
Oh, okay.
So we're able to do that
I
as well.
saw that
so.
we're continuing through August 30th.
Yep, yeah, because we got accepted as a summer feeding program, so, which they were allowing more summer feeding programs because of COVID, so.
Okay.
So we were able to get accepted into that. So that's all basically from the federal reimbursement.
Oh, great.
Joel,
Yeah, yes, sorry.
just a question. Is the 16,000, are those just students? Or is that other family members? Or, because it seems like a huge step from 4,000 to 16,000.
Well, so technically, it's anyone, it goes by age, so we're able to serve anyone, I believe it's 21 and under for the summer feeding program. And we don't necessarily have to ask, like, if they're a student here or not, because, for example, if they were a student at, Assabet or something, and they needed a free meal, they could still get it here from us. But I also remember in March, we only did it for like 2 weeks in March, too. So if you think about it, that's like, because we didn't actually shut down until March, closure didn't start till March 16th, really.
Yeah.
And then we probably didn't start serving food till either the 17th or the 18th. I mean, we had to prepare a little bit there. So I think that's part of why that March looks low, because that's just counting those last couple of weeks when we first started it. Yep.
Yes, go
First
ahead.
off, I'm thrilled to see that the guys actually not only paid everything off, but have a back.
Yeah.
And I know that, to Tina's point, that came out of the federal government, but, I said from the very beginning that, I know it started with you, but, through Mr. Van Ass and his crew, the fact that they jumped on this right away. I know some towns and cities caught up eventually, but you guys, and I know you just said it, kids come down for a meal, parents come down to feed their kids. It was, it didn't matter where you went to school, or even if you lived in Clinton, I guess, for that point. And then I think you had 4 or 5 stops through town.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously, all of us probably have, but you run into people in town and just, I don't know how to say it. I can't put it into words, but they were just so, impressed by the fact that it was just, hey, here's the meals, we're gonna feed it, and then they will feed you through the summer. And
Yep.
it wasn't, and the fact that you turned a profit out of it is even.
Hey, in the beginning, I was like,
that's right, I know.
we kept saying to each other, like, just, this is the right thing to do, just do it, and we'll worry about paying for it, because you knew they were going to relax some of these things, and they did, and it worked out, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Anyone else?
Some reopening updates. So in your packet, there are some proposed resolutions, before I get into some of the reopening stuff we did today. These are all resolutions from the MASC, so some of them have to do with reopening, some also have to do with social justice, but these are all MASC endorsed resolutions. First one was a response to social, economic, and racial justice in our communities. The second one was regarding COVID-19 state funding. The third one was on an anti-racism resolution, and those are the 3 that are being recommended by MASC. So we included them in this report. I don't know if if it's the pleasure of the committee that they want to endorse those resolutions.
What's the pleasure of the committee?
What is I'm still new at this. What is
Sure.
the difference between a resolution and a policy? Or what is the resolution?
So a resolution, we're not, well, in this case, we're showing our support for these whereases. A policy is essentially the law of the school district that we're expecting everyone to follow.
So this is just a show of support?
It's showing support, particularly around basically saying that we want lawmakers to take action on these issues and to help, provide funding, provide training, provide direction, those types of things.
Okay.
Would someone like to make a motion to support these resolutions from the MASC?
I'll make the motion, but I do have,
Questions? Okay. Is there a
I guess
second?
it's technically only 2. The first one's a cover page about what these are, and then the second one is the resolution regarding COVID-19 state funding, and then the resolution for around anti-racism.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, the 10-second synopsis with regard to anti-racism, in our previous meeting, I thought you laid out a compelling case for the direction that the district is heading, that I would think is consistent with this resolution. And with regard to COVID-19 funding, we don't have any control over the legislature's funding, but we are standing, the resolution is for us to stand with the other school districts and the legislature and you know, seeking their support in what will amount to be significant expenditures.
What's it mean by there can be no unfunded mandates for COVID-19?
That was
It's
my,
just-
that
it's
was
a
my
s-
question.
Yeah, it's a statement to the state legislature that MASC will say that, you know, you can't force, the DESE can't force school districts to buy PPE and desks for every child and the expended plexiglass and what have you, and then not be expected to pay for it. We several meetings ago, we voiced a similar show of support for the HEROES Act, which is
Yep.
essentially the federal
The federal level version of
perspective
that.
on this.
Yep.
So we have a motion and a second to show our support for the MASC resolutions on anti-racism and COVID-19 state funding. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just
Yep.
wondering on the anti-racism
Yep.
resolution, has there been definitive guidelines, what, you know, what this is stating, that they're going to be using as a measurable yet? Has it come that far?
In terms, is there a specific thing you're talking about, or like to measure in terms of like,
Well, you know, the part where it says every district will commit to recruiting and retaining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. Is there going to be like certain numbers, or like what's the measurable?
Yeah, so
gonna
typically,
be?
a lot of schools are starting to know this. We went to a couple seminars on this as part of the diversity network, where you might look at trying to set a target percentage of your staff that you're trying to, you know, increase the diversity by over certain years. And then as part of that, that might be your goal, but then you're going to look at your action steps, and action steps might include like, you know, making sure that every interview pool of candidates involves diverse candidates. You know what I mean? So you're making sure that even just getting through the door, you're making sure you're pulling applications to help promote the likelihood of being able to hire a diverse candidate. And then if you can't, you know, if it's a limited pool or something like that, you know, some schools might say you have to repost it again before you can actually move forward, depending on the time of the year. So, but those are different things that we would work with. I think the point of this as a resolution, and this kind of comes back to the original point, as a resolution, this is saying, as a committee and as a district, these are things that we do agree with, and we think that we should start taking steps in this direction. It's not necessarily our policy yet, but it's also trying to get the, you know, when it talks about, you know, the history of racial oppression and those types of things, works from black authors and diverse perspectives, like, those are things that we also are trying to show support. So at the state level, when they look at the state frameworks and the state curriculum, we're making sure that those things are addressed as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Meyer?
Yep.
Don't we already have policies in place for this? Because I do believe, looking with Joel, we already had policies in place that we're a welcoming community and we're already doing these things.
We do. We have a lot of it. And like I said, as a resolution, it's not necessarily
Policy.
it's not necessarily a policy. It's saying that this is just fundamentally, we believe that the state and everyone should all be working collectively towards this. And a resolution is a way for school committees to try to share a collective voice, so that the MASC, when they want to go talk to lawmakers, they can say, you know, these are things that have been endorsed by 300 school committees already.
And this came from the
Yeah.
MASC?
It did.
It did.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion on the floor to accept show our support for the resolutions from the MASC. All those in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? There being none, unanimous, thank you.
All right, sounds good. So we'll make sure that we communicate to the AMSC that we've approved those resolutions. So the next bullet says commissioner updates. I gave you 3 handouts separately from your packet, and we'll talk a little bit about this. We gave the commissioner the commissioner gave us that Friday memo with the frequently asked questions about school reopening that I forwarded to everyone electronically. That is available on their website as part of their reopening guidance, so I didn't put that one directly in your packet or print that out. What I did print out to share with you is some of our preliminary data. This is just scratching the surface. Literally all I did was I took a screenshot of the pie graphs and put them all in one document so we could just kind of look at it quickly. As you can imagine, we had 723 responses, which is very good for our parents. One of the questions said how many kids you have in the district. When you kind of did that math a little bit, you realize this is representing over 1,100 students. So when you figure there's only about 1,800 that come in any given day, that's pretty good. So the first question here was basically based on the guidance, and in the survey it described kind of what the preliminary guidance was. If we were to reopen in the fall for in-person learning, would you send your student to school? About almost 60%, probably somewhere, the high 50s said yes, they want to send their student to school. Only 13% or so, 13.4, said no, I would prefer the remote learning. And then the rest of them, about the 27% or so, 28%, were undecided at this time. So when we're trying to use this data to make our reopening plans, which we are starting today, basically we're trying to figure out, as we're saying, okay, if we look and say 13% of our population we know is probably not coming back if we reopen in the fall, what does that do to class sizes? What does that do to transportation? But right now we're still kind of figuring, we're trying to make, look at the worst case scenario of what if everyone who's in that unsure category says, yes, I'm coming back to school. At the same time, we're trying to think of it the opposite way for the remote learning plan. And when we come up with the kids that don't come back, what are we doing to support those who take a remote learning option, and saying potentially we could have to support 40% of our school on remote learning if all the people who are unsure decide they're going to stay home. Now I doubt it, it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle, but we're just trying to look at those kind of extremes as we start our planning, and then we can figure it out from in between there. So the way this data is presented, you should get the English response breakdown, the Spanish response breakdown, the Portuguese response breakdown for each of these questions. They were all done as 3 different surveys, so I don't have it, we haven't linked all the data together yet to run one chart. However, based on the size difference in the responses, even if we average it together, it's pretty much going to look like the responses to the English survey. What we wanted to really look at these answers was to make sure that there wasn't a huge disparity that we were missing. And I think for these 3, right away you can look at these 3 and say, in the first question, say, that's pretty consistent when you look at that. The next question that we were supposed to ask, according to the state, was if we offered a hybrid model, which kind of configuration would you like? You can see overall alternating weeks, 1, but this is one where there's kind of a little bit of a discrepancy where when you looked at our alternating days was obviously much more, was more favorable in the Portuguese survey and the Spanish survey, which, like I said, they're much smaller sample size, but still something we might need to look into and say, is there a rationale for why there would be a difference there, whether that's, something to do culturally or economically or anything like that, that we would want to make sure that we don't miss. When considering transportation in the fall, how will your student get here? About 45% said overall from the 689 responses said they'd ride the bus. A much higher percentage from the other 2 surveys on riding the bus. So So those are important numbers. We're waiting for guidance from the state still on transportation. They're saying that they don't think it'll be any less than 1 kid per seat, which would give us about 28 kids on a bus. That's about 1/3 capacity, because typically, like for an elementary school, you'd put 3 to a seat. He said it's possible it could be more than that, but they're working on guidelines for that. Another question we were supposed to ask everyone was internet access. You can see we were, I think the middle graph says 75-25, but you gotta remember that 25% literally is, there's 16 responses, so that's 4, right? So, working with Mike, we are still planning on trying to keep about 35 hotspots or so ready to go for the fall, so we have the ability to get internet access out there for those who need it. And then food service, this is another one they wanted us to ask, just to see who needs food service. The big blue dot is just because I gave an other answer for that one. And some people, when they typed in their others, were using their kids' names and stuff, so I just tried to block that out and didn't need to be shared. But that just gave us some information on the foods. And then the next couple of pages are more from the staff. The last couple of pages, staff survey data. We had 220 responses to the staff survey. Of that, 148 of the 178 CTA members, approximately, that was 83% response rate. 53 of the 63 instructional assistants, that's 84%. Those numbers are kind of approximate, because there are some things where I don't know if someone just retired, maybe that's part of, do we count them or not, or were they planning on answering it? I don't know. But it gives us a ballpark just to see. I just wanted to see how what that looked like. First question was, how comfortable are you with returning to school in the fall? 1 was not very comfortable. 10 was the most comfortable. I think I gave them more whimsical names in the survey. 1 was like, I can't even imagine going back to that place, and 10 was like, you just tell me when I'm ready to go, or something like that. But so then when you can see most of our staff were pretty much at least a 5 or higher, with the single highest total being a 10, being comfortable with returning to school. And then, given the preliminary guidance for the state, if Clinton Public Schools reopens in the fall for in-person learning, do you intend to return to work? And no one said no. Everyone either said yes, or at this point they're unsure, with almost 96% saying yes, they plan on returning to work. So that was good, because I'll tell you, I was scared. I purposely went for the 2 weeks not trying to check this data at all, like in between, because I didn't want to I wanted to try to go through and analyze it once, not every 3 days. And you get worried about how was the percentage of students who wanted to return going to match up versus the number of staff who were going to return. And I think this was a positive indication that, obviously there are concerns, and we need to make sure we have a well thought out plan and we're putting the appropriate things in place, but it does show, I think, that a vast majority of our staff want to get back to work. And from the teachers, from the staff, more of them preferred the alternating weeks model. The second one was the morning and afternoon session. I know we wanted to throw that in there because it's an option that's been discussed. We also talked about the logistical challenges of that, because if you are sharing any spaces, they have to be disinfected in between the 2 sessions. And then the last one was just a question we'd asked about if people had taken professional development focused on remote learning or student support during the school closure. And over 60% of our staff said that they had participated in some sort of professional development on remote learning during this time. So I thought that was good. So this is just the tip of the iceberg of this data. There's a lot of other questions we asked about what worked for remote learning, what didn't work for remote learning. We got a bunch of comments. So what we did today was really our school-based teams, basically our administrative teams in each school, started going through the data and trying to find emerging themes based on when they filtered it for their school, and tried to dig deeper into, because these were not anonymous surveys, right? So you could dig deeper into, literally who were my teachers that were concerned about returning to work, and how would that impact my our ability to offer classes, and could those teachers be used in an alternative role to help facilitate students who stay home for remote learning, and just trying to sort of get a sense of, does that stuff all map out? So that was really what we started working on today. So I gave you a list of preliminary thoughts for reopening. That's one of the next handouts I gave you. These are some things that we've been talking about as we've been kind of working on our preliminary ideas. And I'll get into sort of our timeline and goals at the end. But one of the first things we talked about was reducing the length of each school day to reduce exposure time and to provide more options for transportation. So for example, in the elementary school, you need to have 5 hours of instruction a day. If you do that for 180 days, you'll hit your 900 hours. At the high school, you need 5.5. If you do that for 180 days, you'll reach your 990. We exceed those numbers in all of our schools. So if we look at trying to shorten the day so that we would be right at that time, it's also possible that there could be some more flexibility around those guidelines from the state as we move forward, because they are understanding some of the challenges of busing. And that's the other option for that, because by reducing that, we can run more tiers of busing. So we'd be look at basically still probably running all the 9 through 12 on one bus if we can, because those buses normally aren't very full anyway with the number of students who drive. But then taking the middle school, splitting it up to have like a 7 and 8 run, and then a half hour later 5 and 6 would come in, and then a half hour after that 2, 3, and 4 would come in, and then a half hour later K and 1 would come in. And then in the afternoon we'd start the same process again, probably starting around 1:20 up at the high school. One of the things we talked about today, a lot of other schools have started doing this and approving it, is looking at suspending the integrated preschool program and only providing pre-K services to students who have IEPs. And it's a difficult decision to make, and it's definitely not one that you feel good about. But when you think of it's challenging enough to get students who want to follow the rules and guidelines to stay within the rules and the guidelines. It's harder when the younger you get, the more I guess the less self-control those students have. It becomes difficult to imagine those things taking place. And really one of the things about the integrated preschool program is to expose special education students to role model peers and to try to provide some of that social interaction, and essentially we'd be trying to eliminate social interaction while doing that. So that's one thing we're looking at. Moving all the custodians to a day shift or slightly staggered around the day shift, and instead of it being like the building just kind of gets dirty and then at the night we do one big cleaning of it, having each custodian having like a specified area that they kind of like tend to throughout the day, so that we're getting more frequent cleaning of high touch areas. We're trying to add additional sections in grades K to 6. We're anticipating that we can get the maximum class size down to about 15. At CES, a maximum class size of 15 does allow for 6 feet of social distancing in every classroom, which means they would also then be able to eat in the classroom. It would not get us 6 feet at the middle school due to the square footage of those rooms, but it would get us well over the 3-foot minimum. We'd probably be at like 4.5 or something like that, depending on how you configured the room. And like we said, that's what we're anticipating the maximum class size would be. That's based on only 13% of the students not returning. If any of that 27% didn't come back either, chose for a remote learning option, that number would go down. We're looking at modifying the CMS grades 7 and 8 and the CHS schedules. The purpose of that would be to reduce the number of periods in a day and reducing the daily contacts. So as we shorten the day, instead of you having, at the high school, instead of you having 7 short periods during the day, you might only have 4 periods in the day. And then it might be a little longer, but you're going to have 4, say 80-minute periods in a day. And then tomorrow you're going to have a different 4 periods and a different 4 periods, and it'll kind of just rotate through. So that way, instead of you mixing with 7 different groups over the course of the day, we cut that down to 4. Providing a remote learning option for students who don't want to return. The state has done an RFP trying to get a vendor that would be almost like a statewide learning platform that they could offer to students because the state recognizes and we recognize, I can't have teachers teaching a class and at the same time, those same teachers teaching kids remotely, right? They just can't be in two places at once. So what we're envisioning is hopefully maybe some of those staff members who had some, medical reasons that they were hesitant to return, we might be able to put them in a position where they sort of facilitate that online learning, but it's much more guided by this online learning platform that the state is looking at, or we could look on our own. Some possible calendar changes. The idea has been floated around that trying to add some more PD time at the beginning of the year, possibly by maybe reducing the required number of days for kids to come. Instead of being 180, might drop to whatever that might be. And if that's the case, if they end up doing that, then we'd have to, we'd obviously address the calendar for the beginning of the year. But the idea would be to give us adequate time for professional development and training so that all the new protocols, all the new procedures, because you figure everything we've ever done, so many things in a school happen because there's institutional knowledge. And, the buses just kind of know where to drop off, the kids just kind of know what door to get in, and we're going to be changing a lot of that stuff next year, if pretty much all of it. So we're going to need some time to get the teachers to know what's going on, and probably some time to try to bring students in. Some of the evening events, or if there's any flexibility of possibly bringing in students, instead of doing parent-teacher conferences and open house, we almost bring people in for like a registration night where we're going to give them their Chromebook, their password, get them to sign their any paperwork they need, like their receipt of the handbook, all that kind of stuff. Go over with them what the expectations are for like masks, for hand washing, for screening, for all that kind of stuff. And try to make sure that everyone is clear on those expectations and has all the things that they need before we really jump into it. In terms of remote learning emergency planning, meaning this would be remote learning for if the entire school got shut down and had to go into a remote learning situation. We're trying to get 1-to-1 in grades K through 12. We're pretty close right now as we're getting the Chromebooks back that we lent out. We ordered 780 Chromebooks, I think, at the end of last year, and I think those were delivered today. Let's double check with Mike, but I know they were scheduled to be delivered today. So we're definitely able to go 1-to-1 grades 5 to 12. And then we have a bunch of Chromebooks. We should have almost close to 500 Chromebooks if we get all the ones we lent out back already at the elementary school. So he's guessing, Mike was saying we're probably about 200 to 250 Chromebooks away from being 1-to-1. And there is a new technology grant that the state came out with. If you can say if you have matching funds and you can might get some support from them. So we were looking to try to apply to that grant and maybe look at some of our ESSER funding, what I've been referring to as our CARES Act funding, to see if we could pull that off too. And that way what we'd be able to do is add more structure. I mean, obviously if we went into remote learning, we'd be adding more structure. The state's already said they would want things like attendance taken, grades given, those types of things. But if we can get everyone 1-to-1 now, even if we can only get in back to school for a month, we can at least try to set the expectations and everyone's using their Google Classroom, everyone's logging into the appropriate software so that when we do transition into a remote learning situation, it's more seamless. Like we can just kind of switch right into it.
So those numbers that you just gave us that were 2 to 250 away from being 1-to-1 at the
Yeah.
elementary, does that already include the ones that we were going to buy with the leftover money from the bus
Yes.
savings?
Yep.
So those have already been purchased?
Yep.
And we're still
So
2
the
to
ones from
250
the
away?
ones we bought for the bus basically took care of grades. If you think of it this way, they took care of grades 5 to 12.
So we're good there, okay.
And then all the other Chromebooks that we kind of had existing, which most of those we gave out to families, as those come back, they're bringing them back to the elementary school, and we're just keeping them at the elementary school because now they're going to live there.
Okay.
So, the elementary school has maybe 800 kids total in enrollment. If you take away the pre-K, you're dropping that down to closer to 700. We got about 500-ish that we had lent out that we should be getting back. So that puts us in that 200 to 250 ballpark for going 1-to-1. And then the other thing we talked about, I think at this point, we still need to go forward suspending the before and after-school daycare programs. So once we figure out, we know the days, because part of it, I think, is with shortening the days too, is we're also going to want even like teachers, even though it's that shorter day, part of that might count as their prep time or something like that. We're going to say, go home and do your prep, it's fine, because we need to clean the building. Like, I need to start fogging the building and getting it done. So, we can, and so, the daycare just adds one more mix of contact that's going to be difficult to trace, and it also creates another cleaning situation. We'll be evaluating extracurricular activities to determine which ones may be able to run and which ones will not be able to do so. So I think, we got to look at things like clubs, sports, and see, based on what they come out with guidelines, what are we going to be able to run or not run? And understanding that it's not a ton of money, because each stipend itself isn't a lot individually. But as we're looking to come up with how are we defraying the costs of certain things, I mean, there's potential savings in some of those areas if those aren't going to be able to, if we're not going to be able to have, if the Waccamaw Math League is not going to have a season this year because they can't all get together and do math competitions, then we might not have a math club this year. Those types of things. But I'm not saying that for sure. I'm saying those are the things we need to evaluate.
And that's still subject to criteria from the DESE that we're still waiting for?
Yeah,
Okay.
they have not released that yet, right. So we are still waiting for criteria on extracurriculars. We're still waiting on criteria for transportation. We're still waiting on the final template for what they want for their plans to be submitted. They're saying a lot of that will come this week, so I hope so. So our timeline for us, our goal is, as an administrative team, we're hoping by Friday, July 17th, so this Friday, we're meeting all week this week as an administrative team. It's also the MASS Virtual Executive Institute. I know you guys were invited, I think, to go to the keynote speakers. So we're going to watch the keynotes together as an administrative team, since the focus of day one is on reopening schools. The focus on day two is social justice and racial equity. So we'll be paying attention to those as well, to help guide our work as we go through and craft these plans. So our goal is to get a draft plan by Friday. We know that plan won't be perfect. We know that plan won't have every little bug worked out of it, but we want to get a good starting point, because there is so much involved in this that you can't just walk into a room with nothing. And then I think our goal is going to be the week of the 20th to really start getting stakeholder feedback, including meeting with the unions. I know Robin and I were talking about before. I already reached out to Robin, try to say we want to meet on the 20th if we can. The staff at each building, or parent groups, whether it's PTA, CPAC. I also want to try to schedule a safety committee meeting for that week, for next week, so that we can review draft plans with like the Board of Health and our safety committee, with the lead nurses and stuff, so we can try to make sure, maybe even the bus company at that point, and see what people's concerns are there. So I'll try to email you guys tomorrow or something, so we can try to set up a safety committee meeting. For right now, I guess until we do otherwise, because we didn't put it on the agenda, I'll just assume that the subcommittee, or the advisory committees are the same people, since you guys are the same board, but we can always update those at a future meeting. But for this one, I'll just reach out to the same people. I just thought of that right now, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Our goal would be to have pretty much a final version of the plan to bring to the 24th, the school committee meeting on the 24th. The hope would be that the school committee would approve that plan. It's possible there's still some placeholders in that plan for everything, I guess, in the plan is always going to be subject to change, because, hold on, I said 24th.
Yeah,
It's the
you meant
27th, sorry.
Yeah. Jan was checking her calendar.
Right,
Yeah.
sorry, 27th, thank you. So our goal would be to present it on the 27th, that Monday. They're due to the state by Friday, the 31st. So the idea is, if we present it at the school committee meeting on the 27th, at the next meeting, that's one last chance for any input, feedback, changes, and then hopefully, conditional, you guys can approve it pending, whatever final recommendations we have, and then we can at least get it submitted to the state. It doesn't mean in our plan we might have everything ready, in terms of, part of our plan might say, like, if you want to know, exactly are we going to do when a student tests positive? I might not know exactly yet, because that's another one of the guidance that we're waiting from the state. The state is saying they're going to issue that guidance statewide, so that it's going to be more of like, if a kid tests positive, what's your response? Does that class get sent home? Is it everyone they were with gets sent home? If so, for how many days? Like, that kind of stuff. So it's more consistent. I know last year when the cases first started happening, it was kind of like, do you close the school for a day? Do you close the school for a week? What do you do? So they're trying to come out with guidance on that. So there might be some things in our plan as we're going, if we haven't received the state guidance, we might just have almost like a placeholder that says, follow the state medical guidance as of, when we come back to school. That's pretty much our reopening. The one last handout I gave you was the federal grants. We did get our allocations for federal
Dr. Meyer,
grants.
before we
Yeah,
get
sorry, go
into
ahead.
the grants, questions on the reopening plans?
Yeah, I just had one, Steve.
Yeah.
How much, in reading the email, we're going to send them a remote plan, a hybrid plan, and a come-back-to-school plan. How much of the decisions will be coming, do you think, from the state level to say which one we will fall on versus locally the influence being fed up for where we will land? Like, I mean, are we gonna, do you assess that we will be making these decisions locally, and it puts the pressure back on us as a school district, or do you assume that do you think that those decisions will be made more from the state level?
I believe that unless you come back, unless your school committee says, we've done all this work and we physically cannot put together a reopening plan. For us to do a reopening plan, we would need to get 15 modular classrooms, we would need to hire 10 more staff, we would need to do these things, then I think the state is going to try to get everyone to try to move forward with their in-person reopening plan. Unless, now that's the other thing is, that's assuming the data keeps trending positively as it has been. If all of a sudden, people start, having a fun summer as we enter phase 3 now, and cases start rising at the end of August, they might flip it. So I do think a lot of it, I think the expectation right now is they really want as many schools as possible to find a way to reopen. But what they're really trying to ask us with the development of these plans is, how feasible is that? I mean, this is almost their kind of way of testing that water too, because if you say, I think for us, it's a lot easier for us, I think, than a lot of other school districts, because we typically had low class sizes, right? I mean, that's something Clinton's always usually had. We have about 22 in a class. When I was in Athol, there was we didn't bat an eye until 28. So if you try to get from 28 to 15 to do social distancing, that's a lot harder than getting from 22 to 15.
And I think feasibility comes with guideline, right? Though, like if they say you have to do these 3 things in order to stay safe from a health perspective to reopen, those are the things that you sort of have to begin to dovetail together to say, yeah, we could reopen, but
Yeah.
we might not be able to facilitate these 3 things. What does that mean to our decision to reopen or go hybrid or to go remote?
Right.
So do we have enough of that information today, knowing what we will be asked to walk into if we were to reopen the buildings?
I think we have the preliminary guidance, and based on the preliminary guidance they've given on PPE, we've been able to order the PPE. I think the biggest ones we're waiting on right now is transportation. I think that's a huge one. And then that could have a huge financial impact, and that's kind of what they're talking about with the no unfunded mandates, right? So if we budgeted, we budgeted our normal amount for transportation. Now, if all of a sudden there's a DESE mandate that says you can only run at 1/3 occupancy, and now we have to go to D, and D says, well, I got to charge you for all these extra runs we're doing, and now all of a sudden we're hundreds of thousands of dollars over in our transportation line, that's where they're saying, well, the state has to have some sort of mechanism to reimburse you for that. And for us, our problem might be, we're saying, hey, it's transportation. For another district, they might say, hey, there's a space. They need modular classrooms dropped off, or they need to be able to rent space at another location in town that they're going to use to set up a little mini satellite campus, So that's, I think, what they're trying to look for in this round of planning is what are those obstacles. And what's concerning about that is you sit there and you think these plans are due July 31st. So they're going to get, 350 plans or something like that July 31st. I don't know how they're going to down at the state level, how they're going to aggregate that data and really make any type of statewide move in time to really give people reasonable notice. I mean, the clock is just, it's running, you know?
Well, I
It's
think
almost like, thank God we weren't starting until September 1st anyway this year.
Right. Well, I think for parents or for anybody, right, even for us as school committee members, the inclination would be to crawl, walk, run.
Yep.
Right? So that way you could say, what does the data tell us when we're at 35% capacity? All was good, metrics were good, everything went well. Okay, then we went to 60% capacity, then what happened? Versus saying, let's reopen it, bring back 85% capacity, and then we find ourselves in a position where we're having to backtrack pretty hard, right? So it'll be very interesting to see as the guidance comes down,
Yeah.
how they think about that, because moderation would probably be the preferred mechanism to figuring
Yeah.
out how to bring people back, not, we're just going to go.
Right.
So I'm just interested to see more of that information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's their version of I think that's also what they're going to kind of look for maybe in that hybrid version too.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if one extreme is we're full reopening, one extreme is we're fully remote, that hybrid is almost, like I feel like you almost don't write the hybrid plan. The hybrid plan is like your transition plan of how do we get from here to here.
Yep,
So,
sure. Thanks, Steve.
Any other questions?
so it's
Just wanna
pretty much,
say thank you again to you, to your team, to everyone involved in this Herculean task. Again, I never miss an opportunity to say Clinton has been ahead of the, no pun intended, curve throughout this whole time, and clearly it looks like you are continuing to do so. So thank you for all of your efforts, and please extend that to everyone involved in this work.
the one thing I did give you, another sheet, was this grant comparison between FY20 and FY21. We did get our FY21 federal grant allocations, not for IDEA, not our Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grants, but our other ones. And the only reason I'm sharing it with you is just because there's a few things. In FY20 this past year, for example, we had $350,000 that we had received in Title I Part A money, typically just referred to as Title I. In FY20, that allotment is down to $299, so we lost about $50,000 in grant funding there. Title II-A, which is teacher quality, which can also sometimes be used for class size reduction, was $52,000, it's down to $43,000. Our Title III went up. That's because it's still almost like our per pupil was cut, but our pupils went up. And then the Title IV, which is more, there's not a whole lot of restrictions on the Title IV grant. We did get a minor increase in that, about $1,500. But all that being said, we should note Fund Code 113 at the top there of FY21 is that ESSER grant. That's that CARES one I've been referring to, where we got $288,000. That's allocated using a similar formula to Title I. So, we got substantially more funding in that based on our Title I status. So, I guess in one respect you can say, well, they cut our Title I $50,000, but we also got this $288,000, which is directly in response to trying to help offset costs with COVID. So those are things that we're using for. So just thought it was worth throwing it out there, because a lot of times those are things we try to squeeze some money out of to look and say, how could we maybe sneak another teacher here? Could we maybe do something with this? And right now, it doesn't look real good in terms of being able to sneak people into those grants. I'd say the good part is when Alyssa Piamarini was in the role of literacy coach, she was paid out of the Title I grant. Now that she's the interim assistant principal, we were basically going to not fund the literacy coach position anyway, so that $50,000 cut doesn't result in like any of our Title I staff losing their positions. It just means we don't really have a lot more flexibility in that grant besides that. All right. I think that's, then I was just say our admin retreat is going on this week. We're working on the reopening plans. Tomorrow we'll do the virtual executive institute. We're hoping to get to some sort of district goals and our professional development plans. We talked a little bit about them. We have a lot of professional development that we're trying to get in to help us in terms of, we're looking at software like iReady, which is a way to do online assessments to identify gaps. It would automatically take that data, map out learning paths, those types of things. But we can't implement those until we've trained teachers on how to use them, those types of things. So we're trying to map that out, get that stuff tentatively scheduled. And then, so we'll try to, bring everything we can put together this week, we'll bring it to you on the 27th. Future meetings are in here, and I called it the 24th again. It must have been a Monday in June was the 24th or something, because I had my calendar on the wrong month for like a month. So July 27th, at that meeting, Russ Carlstad's going to come give an update. He's been trying to work with the town accountant and town administrator, I guess, to try to make sure that there's CARES Act money that was directly given to the town to help look at different upgrades, that we're trying to get some of our HVAC and some bathroom repairs that we need, particularly in the middle school, try to replace sinks, try to increase our sink capacity, doing some of those facility type things. So I'll let him talk to you about that at the next meeting in terms of the facility updates, what they have done, what they're planning on doing. And then there is a MIAA meeting, I think it's next week, and we should hopefully be getting the sports and extracurricular guidance soon. So I know a lot of people are anxious about, what's this fall sports season going to look like? Is there going to be one? So hopefully we'll have a little bit more update on that at the 27th that we can also share.
Steve, just one thought. Would it be helpful for you or for the committee for us to share the items that we collected during our walkthroughs at the beginning of last year as to what we felt we identified of things that needed to be done or were supposed to be done, and correlate those with the report coming back to us from Russ next week? And if we get them to him, say, over the next few days, then at least we can see what progress we've made. I mean, we did those walkthroughs, we all took the time to do them, we identified spots for improvement. It'd be kind of nice to see where we stand against that list when we walked through a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, if you have certain things like that you would like to share with me, I can certainly put that together.
Yeah, I think, Mary, you have all of those lists, right?
We didn't really have them. Didn't we try to compile this before? And we didn't really get them. I think most of them were just kind of given orally at the committee meeting. So all we had was maybe what got captured in the minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
And Russ has those.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I think that ends my report,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we will start with some very good news. I don't know how much it reflects on our committee, but it certainly reflects on our community. And I would like to recognize, or have us recognize, our committee member and new vice chair, Tina Zapantis, being honored as the Commonwealth heroine, and for the many, many, many things that she does for this community, for the good of others. And there is an article from the item that's in your packet as well, but congratulations, and thank you for being you.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you.
Nice job, Tina.
I was mad it was virtual. I was going to try to go because you came to mind, but. All right.
Do we have anything from our advisory committees? As Dr. Myers said, Safety Committee will be meeting. I assume that you want to stay in the roles that you've been in. If you would like to do something else, that's certainly fine. Let me know, and or just let Mary know. And maybe it'd be helpful if you wanted to publish a list again of the. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Matt and Brendan.
Yep. Policy, looks like we'll have a little bit of work to do to take a look at some new advisories, and obviously, there's
I think, yeah,
amount
as the
of
guidance
things.
comes out and we move closer to the school year, I think
Yeah.
we're gonna have to, all these, the curriculum committee might have to have a quick meeting, even if we don't have all the teacher representation we normally do, to talk about, how are we going to adjust for changes in pacing? Are we gonna have to look at identifying, essential standards again, kind of like last year, that we're really gonna focus on and make sure that we're hitting on those in our classes? So that's curriculum, obviously safety, we already talked about in terms of just the physical, how can we get back here? And then policy and procedures, I think, we're gonna have to look at some things, and I think hopefully a lot of it will be covered by the state, but I mean, we're gonna have to have a policy in place that says like, during this time, do we have a policy on, wearing masks, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a student and you refuse to wear a mask and you're of this age, like, what is the acceptable criteria for, what's an exemption? If you're exempt from a mask, what is the alternative? Is it a face shield? And if you refuse to comply with any of those, like, what is the consequence? Because you don't want to be, you don't want to turn this into a power struggle, tug of war, where everyone's battling over everything. So part of it we have to do is just have that stuff articulated in advance. And then I think that's part of the training we have to do with parents before we just kind of say, hey, come on back, that's what I'm saying, you kind of bring parents and kids in like small groups or one at a time, and you kind of walk through, like, this is where the parent drop-off zone would be. You're going to walk up this hallway. Like, you have to have your mask on once you come in the building. You have to wash your hands when you come in the building. So we'll probably have sort of a packet or series of COVID-related policies and procedures. But I think a lot of it will come from the state. But then I think we'll go from there.
I want to go back to last year when our biggest concern was head lice
Yeah.
and mosquitoes.
No, don't say that. That hasn't gone away either.
Yeah, and Triple E's back too. Did you hear that? So can't go out, can't stay in. No, but-
Killer hornets.
The instructional, under the negotiation subcommittee, I don't know if you're there yet, but the IA negotiations, their contract technically has expired now. It does say in the contract that obviously the existing contract stays in effect.
Yeah.
So I think we'll also try to reach out to the negotiations committee pretty soon. I talked to Sharon on some recommendations as far as moving forward, and I think it will, that I'll review them with, I don't want to negotiate in public, so I'll review them with the negotiations team, and we can maybe have an executive session at one of the upcoming meetings just to kind of map out our strategy and I'll reach out to the IAs. I mean, I would say a lot of our proposals originally, and a lot of the things that collectively we were trying to clarify was expectations around things like summer school and stuff, which all became a moot point this year.
Yeah.
So, I think that we didn't really lose a lot of ground by missing those out and I think we might be able to get at least something in as a stopgap to help us move forward.
We have members that are serving on the IA contract already? We already named them?
Brandy and I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because we actually we had a couple sessions and
Okay.
then it just kind of,
Which I'm happy to stay on that committee if it's
Okay.
the pleasure of the board. I don't know if Brandy wants to.
Yeah, I'm good.
You good?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you both. Marketing?
Well, with the whole,
No, I know. yeah.
we haven't had any meetings, but,
The newsletters have been great. I mean, I assume.
honestly, like, it's been the most productive marketing year yet.
we did not do a June one. That deadline snuck up on me. I'm thinking I'll do one probably in a week or two. We'll just call it
Well-
like summer update, like
Yeah.
a one summer one, and then we'll
Let
get
them
back
know.
on the monthly
Yeah.
as we go.
Yeah,
but-
I mean, I would have just assumed that the next newsletter would have all of the, as much of the reopening
Right.
information as it can. And until you get that, what's the point of putting one out? I mean, there's certainly good news to share, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything under old business? Anything under new business?
I just had a thought today, and I haven't checked the website. Do we have an updated picture of the school committee on the website with Matt? I think the last one has Ed.
Need a couple of,
Bios? Okay.
Been 3 years.
Brendan, do you want me to write yours? Is that something you think maybe we could take a picture tonight?
If not tonight, can we do it on the 27th? Because I have my CPS mask, I just don't have it with me.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, well, we can, that's a good point. We'll go over that, because every year we're going to have to go through and try to refresh the website
Every year we'll
anyway.
take a picture, so this year's picture will be appropriate with masks, right?
That's fine. That's fine.
All right,
Mr.
so
Bailey
we'll-
wants to get a haircut.
Yeah,
He's
I gotta get
looking
a
pretty
haircut for
shaggy
that
right
one,
now.
So,
Longest I've ever seen it, Justin Bieber.
so the 27th, we'll take a new picture.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I share, are we under new business right now?
We are under new business.
Can I share one thing I neglected to go over in the beginning, because we just had it listed as retirement, but I did want to share that we did also receive a resignation from Alexandra Bonner. She was hired as an IA last year at the elementary school. She then actually filled in as a long-term sub for us because she had just graduated, so she was actually certified as a early childhood teacher, so she filled in as a long-term sub in a kindergarten classroom. But she did her schooling in Texas. She's actually going back to Texas and taking a teaching job there, so we wish her well.
Indeed. Anything else under new business? Nothing? Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mrs. Goodsell.
Seconded.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Unanimous?